And welcome to the Eli Sports Network. I'm Paul Beatty, along with Mick Hoffman from the WIAA, the executive director. And man, Mick, it's been a while since we've sat down and had a chance to chat. Last year at this time, we were talking, I think, every week at the time. Your executive board was meeting every week, and things were up in the air, and we were just we'd call it 13 months ago, if you'll remember. We were all excited because it looked like at that time we might be a little bit normal going into last school year. And then just a year ago from now, everything was in disarray once again with the COVID pandemic exploding again over the summer. This year, a bit different. Yes, we've got some issues, but overall, the State Department of Health released their guidelines yesterday. You guys put those out. I was pretty surprised, I think, in some of it at this point. And it just a quick overview, Mick, it seems to give you guys a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, I think it caters to people's options. So if people, depending on people's personal beliefs around the vaccine or testing or masking, essentially, you get more options depending on what you choose. And for us, we get to have fans. Kids don't necessarily have to play with a mask if they have certain options that they choose. And there's going to be testing. So, we can have what we think will be a safe and healthy environment with less restrictions than what we've had in the past, despite this variant and surge. So, we spent essentially the last 6 weeks working with the Department of Health Governor's Office, but we also brought in the 2 risk management groups and the superintendent's group. And so, they've all been very giving of their time. We pulled the meeting together. So we get caught in the middle. And so we figured, let's get out in front. And so on July 28th, we all met together to look at the proposed language, and make sure it was going to be interpreted in a common way. So, for example, last spring, at one point, you may recall, the state came out and said, okay, you don't have to wear masks anymore. But we didn't change that in our competitions the last 2 weeks. People are screaming and yelling why. Well, the risk management companies were still telling schools, because the K-12 guidelines said they had to mask at school, the new guidelines didn't specify not for activities. And so we wanted to try to eliminate as much confusion as we can, as best you can in a situation like this. And those risk management groups, the superintendent's office, Joel Lunny, and the governor's office and Department of Health were very collaborative. And that's why I think you see a document that most of us can understand going through, and there's not nearly as many questions as what we've experienced in the past. So, we really appreciate all of them working together with us.
And then let's be clear on the risk management. We're talking insurance, right? Insurance companies mostly that step in. And again, this isn't just a one prong, it's easy to lay blame at the State Department of Health or the governor's office. But as you mentioned, not only are they involved, risk management and the superintendents, but still individual school districts still have power over what they do as well. And so those guidelines can also still be different. And so, as clear as you want to make it, and that's, that's great news to hear that force you guys brought together. And so you're on the same page. Still, there can be some interpretation like we saw with individual counties that decided to vary from what the state health department said, much as the school district certainly can do what they want in the end as well.
Absolutely. School districts are independent. Inslee and Superintendent Reichel have come out loud and clear. This is state law. If you don't follow, it's going to impact your funding. But they can still choose to do that, right? And in addition, they can always be more restrictive. And now we have some counties with masking mandates. So we're trying to figure out what's that going to look like in sports, and they need to work that out with their local DOH, right? Because we, as a WIA, no different than any other agency in the state, we're trying to serve both ends of the extremes, right? We have some people who would be content right now locking back down and masking in their homes and nothing happening to feel safe. And we have other people who are done. This is over. Burn the masks and let's go. No vaccines. And so we serve both ends of the spectrum. So that's why, we said at the outset, we're going to follow the data and the science. And no matter how people try to manipulate that, there's true findings out there that, and you're never going to have anything that's 100%, but we're going to follow the majority because we're talking about kids' health and safety.
Exactly. Let's dig in a little bit and start with the masking requirements coming up for the fall. And again, I think the other thing to keep in mind, Mick, is that all of these guidelines could turn on a dime if conditions change, as we saw last year several times. And they can turn on a dime for the good or the bad. We saw them go both ways last year. If you'll remember, we thought another 17 counties were about to be locked down there just after basketball started. And instead, the governor froze everything and then actually eased up on it, kind of went the complete opposite. So you guys, again, not only the WIA, but every athletic director in league and the way they responded to what they can do and focused on what they can't do instead of worrying about what they're restricted from doing. We got a lot of action in over the spring. But as far as the masking goes, in generic terms, and again, we'll caveat this, that individual areas, individual districts, individual school districts could all be a little bit different, depending, and as you mentioned, could generally, very likely would be more restrictive than anything else outside, I think. That way they're not breaking the state rules and potentially losing funding going the opposite way. But I think you would see some districts maybe go a little bit more conservative and be a little bit more restrictive. So that being said, what are some of the generalities when we're talking about masking? And we'll just take the fall sports for now. We're talking about football, girls soccer, volleyball, and then you have, in some cases, tennis and golf, cross country, and slow pitch, and girls swimming, I think, is the other one off the top of my head.
Yeah. So from a fan's perspective, outdoors, not required. Now, again, like you said, some counties may have some different requirements. Indoor, right, in general.
Oh, say that again. It kind of broke up there.
Oh, sorry. Outdoors, fans won't need to wear masks. Some counties could be more, school grounds could be more restrictive. And indoors, they're going to need to wear masks. Kids,
fans will have to wear masks.
Fans, participants outdoors will not need to wear masks. There's recommendations that they do it while they're on the sidelines and try to keep spacing, whether on dugouts or sidelines of soccer or what have you. But while they're actively participating, no masks outdoors, including football. Indoors, low and moderate. So in the fall, for most high schools is volleyball, right? And so they don't have to wear masks while they're actively participating. But while in the locker room and on the bench and on the bus, they need to. So that's, in the fall, that's essentially what we're looking at. We're working at, so if it's a sport where they're running and they're vaccinated, they won't have to wear masks, it looks like. If they're not vaccinated nor tested, then they would have to. Football, those kinds of things. Volleyball, not a lot of running when you officiate volleyball.
Right.
It's about my speed. And other than the judgment piece, I don't know if I keep up. But they would need to mask in that setting. So yeah, so we were surprised when we saw the first one, that especially with the volleyball inside, that lower moderate contact, that they weren't going to require. Cheer and dance will need to mask up. Same thing, unvaccinated have more options not to mask, or they can test to avoid masking. So
the cheer and dance, for the most part, in the fall is more often or not at football games than outside. So they would fall under the outside guidelines in those cases, right? Yep.
Weight rooms, kids are going to have masks on the whole time. There's some really nice ones in the schools, but a lot of times they're kind of cramped, they're tight quarters, a lot of poor ventilation, a lot of kids in there. So that's specified in these new guidelines. They have to wear them all the time inside when they're working out. But and it's recommended while they're practicing to wear masks in all sports out inside. So again, there's some best practices to consider, but the have tos give a lot more opportunity to not have to mask while participating.
That's tremendous news. And along with that, there were testing procedures that were also included in that. How is that going to work? I know wrestling was one that was really wrestling with it, so to speak, last year, and the frequency that they were being required. What type of frequency are we looking at as far as testing goes for the fall sports?
Yeah, so we have some middle school leagues that play fall basketball. There's some wrestling. So it'll be similar to what we did last year. They need to test 2 to 3 times a week. So the 2 minimum recommended, maybe doing 3, but they have to do it on contest dates. They're gonna, and the reason is you're gonna leave your team cohort and go compete against another community, right? Another school. And so to provide some flexibility, one of the challenges for wrestling was trying to do it in the morning when they're weighing in. It's already hectic, busy, quality control, or doing it after school when you're trying to get on the bus. So there's going to be the ability to do it the night before a contest, and you'd be good for those 24 hours. On a tournament, a Friday, Saturday tournament, or a Saturday, Sunday tournament, you'd be expected to test in the morning before each day because in tournaments, you're going to have multiple communities coming together. Not very many double dual type situations like that. You're talking, several schools represented. And so the idea is not to spread. And so there's a little more testing there. Basketball, same thing, a couple times a week, 3, if you've got 3 games, test the day of, and you test negative, go play. If you're unvaccinated, or if you're vaccinated, you go play. So.
Okay, let's get to the hard question then, is that, let's say there is a positive, what is the protocol for not only that individual, but for, in a team sport, what is it for the team?
Yeah, so if you're vaccinated and you're not symptomatic, you're not showing any symptoms, you don't have to quarantine. If you're unvaccinated, you need to test. And then it also deals with lengths of quarantines. So that's one where we could see some variation from county to county, depending on their local Department of Health. So essentially the short answer is, I'm not going to go into all the detail because honestly, I'm still absorbing it. But if you're vaccinated and you're not symptomatic, you can avoid quarantine. If you're not vaccinated, you have far less options, and you're most likely looking at some form of quarantine.
Yeah, or staying at home. But with that, with the contact, then if it's one person, I assume then the other unvaccinated players that may have had contact, that's where there's going to be an issue over the ones that are vaccinated. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. Yep. Because there's going to have to be some quarantining and/or testing. So.
And then the contact tracing, that whole thing shifts into gear there, so to speak. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is, because we get, and clearly we broadcast sports, and there's a lot of sports. WIA is also activities, and so that includes band and drama and other extracurricular activities. What are some of the things that that those folks are going to have to do? Is there anything really different than what sports are facing?
No, not really. More masking while during performance. So I know they've requested and received, granted another meeting with the Department of Health next week to see if they can't. For whatever reason, their requirements have been more stringent even than athletics. And so they want to try to align now based on the data and what we know, that the studies that have come out of the NFHS, the aerosol studies, to be allowed that if they test and/or are vaccinated, maybe not to have to mask while they're performing as often. So I'm not just in as far as the deep dive on the study, because there's some implements you can put on your instruments and other ways to reduce the dispersal of possible contaminants. And so they're going to work that out next week with the Department of Health. So hopefully, again, they'll, if it's reasonable, they'll get more to that middle ground than to extreme. So they're a little more stringent than athletics right now. So we're hoping to try to help. That's really it's been an interesting process with that, because that really falls under OSPI, not us. But people don't draw those kinds of lines. So OSPI has been great in communicating with us, and Justin's done a phenomenal job of bringing information to the Department of Health and OSPI to help with that process. So
I would assume the biggest concern with most of that is most of those activities are indoors, number one, right? Drama and band practice,
quarters. Yeah,
things like that.
Quarters, right?
Yeah.
Put a lot of kids in a band room. You put, a choir. They're typically, they're not performing in the auditorium. They're practicing in practice rooms, and so it's a little trickier depending on your building ventilation. In a gym, you got high ceilings, and so there's more space. So there's a reason for it. So we're just trying to continue to help get to that point of what's reasonable. Let's not be too extreme either way.
Right, exactly. A couple of other things I wanted to touch on with you that we've seen as a result of the last year, and let's start with the officials. We already knew that it was going to be, we continued to lose officials year after year, but that was sped up this last year, where I talked with several associations and they were down between 30 and 50% this last spring. Are you anticipating a big, this is the area that really scares me a little bit, Mick, because I just don't know if those older officials that could even just come in to do JV and sub-varsity games to fill a lot of those roles, if they're coming back or not. Has there been a good grasp of what our officiating looks like? And why do I think the schedule that everyone had to go to last year, literally last spring, literally Monday through Saturday, may still be in play here to make sure there's enough officials to go around? Am I being overly cautious here?
No, you're spot on. We anticipate a huge gap in our numbers from what we've had to here. People had, in some cases, 2 years off and found other things to do with their time, decided maybe it wasn't worth it. So what we're working on with WOA, matter of fact, I'm going on a call with them tonight with their board, just to see where we can be helpful. We really need to make a concerted effort to recruit that younger official, right? To start growing because we have 2 tiers and we keep losing them. And so we got to recruit them, then we got to retain them.
Yeah.
And that's what we got to talk through. And so I know I'm hearing from in the officials world that they're starting to bring on recruiters and mentors, and they're changing their structure. They're, a lot of places it's been a pretty traditional structure. It's worked for 50 years. Let's keep going. Well, it's a different world. And now, with our arbiter program, kids are getting paid right away. So, for a kid before having to wait 6 weeks or so to get paid, that's hard to do, right? I mean, none of us like that. You get paid once a month, going from a paid weekly or biweekly into once a month. Adults are like, hey, wait a minute, they got budgets and stuff figured out. And so for a kid now getting paid within 24 or 48 hours, there's a little more of that financial reward. So then if we can mentor them through, taking the heat that they take from coaches and parents, give them some, skills for that, where they find success, they get some money in their pocket to go do the things they want to do. We think we can fix it. So we're going to have a short term. It's going to be tough. I'm not going to lie. I mean, school's going to have to be flexible like they were in the spring to make sure we can get game filled. But we got to address it with a long-term solution in mind. And so that's where we're at. The other piece, as an association, AWSL. So it's an offshoot. It's a student leadership program out of our state principal association. They're really interested in partnering on some sportsmanship training. And so we're hoping to do that because, the things we hear is it's hard to go to a job that you can't make a living at and get screamed at and belittled publicly. And so, essentially we got to get to parents and our kids to help with that, because that's the number one reason we lose officials. I mean, who wants to get publicly screamed at? we don't pay enough for people to take that kind of heat. You can't pay enough. I mean, it's not what we're about. And so we really
especially right now.
Yeah, so we need to get real serious about what are things we can do to proactively get in front of it, and then when it does happen, shut it down. So, so we're working with our schools, with the game management and that, and we want to bring some resources to kids and help with that. So, so we're trying to get out in front of it, but yeah, short term, it's going to be tough, and it's as you know, it's a national problem. It's not just Washington, and so. I was happy to hear some of the stuff out of WOA of what they're trying to do with some associations, piloting some recruiting and mentoring programming. So we'll get there. So we just got to get through it.
And some of the strategies to deal and mentoring for officials is a great idea. But another great idea is for parents to shut their mouths and cheer for their kid. How about that? There's an idea, just a thought. And a coach, you may not like how a game is being called. How about coach, earn your money there and coach around it? How about that? So we could try those too. So
and so not being retired is blunt, but what I can tell you is, that's one of the things you talk to kids. I mean, that embarrasses the heck out of a kid when their parents acting that way.
Yeah,
there's a ton of research that shows kids play to have fun, right? That's why they play. And so when the adults are screwing it up for them, whether it's a coach acting a fool or a parent, or whatever, it ruins the experience for the kid. So we're actually working on how can we help the kid who can't say that to mom or dad, right? The dynamics at home don't allow that, but how can we message that to hit parents with that between the eyes who are doing it? No, not all parents are doing that, right? But the parents that are the ones we remember in the stands. How can we message that in such a way that it sticks and makes a difference, rather than saying, you're an idiot, they tell us we're soft, and we go to the next game and deal with the same thing. So, that's, no one's figured it out totally yet. So we'll get there. And we're open to some ideas, but we're definitely going to work on some things to the point, how we have our, you sit in a ton of games and you hear the sportsmanship thing, right?
Yeah. Well, the mumbling that it is occurred there. Yeah.
What about this? What about if you put a kid on the mic, the girl is going to be the starting goalie, and she gets up there and she goes, hey, look, we want to welcome Shelton High School to Bonnie Lake. We're here tonight to compete. We really want to beat them, but not that at the expense of our integrity. We're here to have fun. So parents, please cheer positive, don't critique, don't coach, and don't make a fool of yourself while we play. We're going to try to do the same thing towards the officials and our opponents, right? I mean, to have a kid grab a mic and say something like that, when you talk about hitting them up in the eyes. So, so we're talking about like, hey, can we pull that off? Will schools do it? And so we're throwing some of these ideas, they're kind of crazy, but what do we have to lose at this point? Because we're losing officials. We're losing the joy of playing. Kids aren't going to keep participating. So, so there's some ways to kind of do that, I think. And
you really hate to think that it would have to get, and I don't know why we didn't see, more of this. I don't understand why the thought doesn't get through a little more from this last spring, when so many games had to be canceled and moved because of a lack of officials.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're not even talking about school bus drivers, which is another issue all itself. We had games canceled because there's no transportation. So if that's how you want, your child's athletic experience to go, is because you can't just focus on them playing. I've said this to many parents sitting in the stands before a basketball game. I said, yeah, you may have wanted that 3 and a key called there, but you know what? Your kid's got 12 points. You're missing a heck of a game. You may want to start watching them. So that's that. Here's my piece. I'm gonna give you. This is gold, Mick. You can take this and run with this. I want to do a basketball game that is called like the fans are screaming, and we need to video that. And we need to send that around. Now, if you want the game to look like this, 29 3-seconds in the keys called, 40 travelings called, all of that, we should do it in a non-league or practice situation and show that's how it'll look if all the things you want called are called. Really? Is that what you want? And show them what it will look like. That's what it will look like. I think it would be a powerful statement.
That's actually brilliant. That's brilliant, but I think that we could only stand to watch it for maybe a quarter.
Maybe a quarter.
At that point, we'd all be poking our eyes out. How about, here's another one, since we're coming up with great ideas. The parents who are screaming at the officials in the stands, we find out where they work. We get permission. We send the official to their work the next day to follow them around and critique them and yell at them and publicly shame them for how they go about their job as well. No, I mean, we joke about it, but honestly, we have to take more extreme measures to turn this, because it's a societal issue. It's not just parents, right? It's happened.
Yeah.
Look at social media, look at the road rage. I mean, look at our politics, look at everything. I mean, everything has to be about tearing somebody down. There's very little building people up, wrapping arms around and helping them. And we're education based, we're community focused. Everybody saw and felt what we were losing, but we went too quickly from let them play to let me in to take this mask and do something with it. Hit that extreme in 3 weeks. We did a 180 on where we're at because we forgot how painful it was not to have what we're after, which is watching our kids play, experience, and learn from those education-based activities. So we do have to do some extreme things. I always tell everybody I keep my credentials current in case any of these ideas go into play and they don't work out.
I'm pretty sure your idea was a Seinfeld episode, by the way, as well.
Oh, was it?
I think so. So I think Jerry followed a heckler to their work, and
did he?
I think there was a loss of a pinky toe in that episode, but it was very effective. Very
Good.
effective.
See, I'm all about stealing ideas.
That's my whole career. It's just been completely stolen. Hopefully, I stole it from the right people. Last thing here, and this is, we talk about, and again, when we're talking about, let's also be fair, when we're talking about kids, coaches, and parents that are unofficial, they're still very much vastly in the minority, and they don't override for everyone else. There is another issue, and I wrote about this a month or so ago, about the number of coaching positions. Same thing is happening with coaches, Mick. I don't know if you've, I don't know how much you've been watching, but I'm watching your own listings on the WIA, and then I subscribe to a couple of these hiring services, and I'm getting messages every single day for coaching openings from middle school all the way up to, I think there's still a couple of schools looking for a head football coach or a head volleyball coach at this time. And you talk to some of the coaches, and they go, we're making 10 cents on the hour already. It's a year-round project, and it's just this constant hammering of, why isn't my kid playing, and you don't know what you're doing, and all of this kind of stuff. And in the end, we're just going to continue to chase people out of it. It's just not worth it to them for what they're being compensated to take as much grief. So again, another concern issue. To me, it just looks like it to me that coaching openings are much larger than I remember over the past couple of years alone.
Yeah, no doubt. We have 75 new ADs out of 400, and that
wow.
Right now. Yeah, I'll tell you,
and some have changed within that. They've changed schools.
Absolutely. I heard a really good presentation this summer at a meeting I was at. And it was talking about the difference between community-based sports and school sports, right? And there are some great club programs out there. So this isn't a blanket over everybody, but the club industry is one of the largest unregulated industries in the entire country. And it is based on getting parents to believe, for the most part, parents to believe that their kids are so special, which we all want to believe as parents, that they have this huge potential, which we all want to believe as parents, and that they can go to college and be on TV like all those other people you see. Now, so what happens is they pay a lot of money to go play on these teams. They think they need to travel all around the country or world. They got to pay, a lot of them require private lessons, $100 an hour or whatever. And parents spend tens of thousands of dollars on kids in elementary and middle school. So by the time they get to high school, great for all these years, they've invested all this time and energy. They don't go on some families don't go on vacation. Their vacation is going to watch their kids play 6 soccer games in 2 days, right? And in 3 states away. And again, it's not all club sports, but that's the reality of what's happening. So now if their kid doesn't get it, right, it's not that their kid's not good enough. It's not that they haven't been prepared to that point. It's not that their gene pool that puts limitations on them. It's because that high school coach. And so, again, how do we combat that? Well, one is we got to let people know that less than 5% of all kids play in college and less than 2% play at the Division I level. And that only 3 guys typically on an NCAA baseball team you watch in the college series have full scholarship. Everybody else is partial, and they're playing 24 months a year, right? They're going 2 months a month. They're playing. You're up at 6 running. Like, they don't know what it is and how many kids quit. And honestly, on the education-based side, not that we have to compete, we serve different purposes. We can coexist, but we have to do on the education side is make sure parents understand the reality, because it's not going to come from the club circuit where, entire companies are being based on that. And again, it's not all clubs. My daughter played club volleyball. My son played club sports, played AAU. I mean, there's places where that's not the truth, but in general, that's what we see. And as parents, we all want our kids to be the one, right? And that one story makes 10,000 kids think they can do it, but the odds are, here's the reality. What you get out of this is going to make you a better parent, a better employee, a better community member. And you think about a lot of the issues we deal with, it's that me, I perspective, and we perpetuate that in a lot of different ways. So I think so again, club sports, we can coexist. We serve a different need. As players need to be able to go play. If they have the chance to be a professional soccer player, we need to make sure she has a chance to be a professional soccer player. But at the same time, 99% of the girls that she played with to get there aren't going to play after high school, right? Unless they can afford to pay to go to a school, a small school, private school typically. And that's the reality of it. And so in the interim, they lose out and miss out on those memory-making experiences throughout middle school and high school because they're so focused on chasing this ghost. And we got to do a better job of making sure we realize the potential, the real potential, not squash dreams. We need to make dreams, but also make those dreams a reality and special before they get out of high school. So we just have to be more intentional. That's on us. We can do that. We got smart people working for us. And then our coaches are going to stay around. Our officials are going to stay around. We're going to have people for years doing the work like it used to when all of us came through and have those warm memories of participation. So
if you're going to spend $20,000 on your kid's athletic future, then spend $16,000 instead and take the other $4,000 and hire a tutor, and you'll get $1,000 to 1 in academic scholarship money over any potential athletic scholarship money on a regular basis, over and over and over again. There are a ton of scholarships academically that go unclaimed every single year, full chunks of money just sitting out there, and you're worried about chopping up an NAIA $1,000 scholarship between 3 people. And that's your payoff for 20 grand, into training. So that's the reality, that's the harsh reality of it. So absolutely, Mick.
Well, and the other piece is Southern Idaho has a really successful baseball program over there. And our godson went and played that and was successful. But when he showed up in the fall, there's 100 kids, 100 kids for the baseball team. and they were all really, really good players. And not only did they have to get up and run and work out every day and play baseball all fall, but then in their free time, they're out chopping wood, raising money for the program. I mean, literally. And so by the time the season rolled around, there might be 40 kids to choose from. So 100 kids who were really talented had to fight through all that. And guess what? They win a lot of contests and they do all that. But a lot of people don't realize, like, that's the situation you get into once you get through high school and you go play at college. It's a job, it's work, and you're competing, and it's a different environment. So, and for kids who love it, it's great for him. He loved it, right? He went after it. He didn't get to play as much as he wanted sometimes, but he got to play in some World Series, and he's gonna have those memories. He has friends for a lifetime. Made it through, but there's 60 other kids that washed out that were good enough to play there, but they just didn't have that other factor that, to be able to persevere. So, that's what parents don't understand. They don't know.
Well, that, and the big question there then, Mick, is out of those 60 kids, who wanted it more, them or their parents?
Yeah.
And maybe it's time to have a heart-to-heart with your child, find out what he or she actually wants out of athletics and what is really important to them that they get out of it and what they truly want to do, instead of trying to follow a path that you wish you would have maybe as, when you were at that age or whatever it is. But there are so many different options these days. It is a little bit worrisome that we see so much specialization, even when the top coaches are saying diversify. You're hearing Nick Saban and Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll are all saying play different sports. You got to play more than one sport, and it's just this belief that we got to focus on this thing and get through, and that'll be the answer to all our hopes and dreams. And it's as you mentioned so many times, not even close to that. So,
our job to educate them, though. We got to do it, right? I mean, that's the thing, because they're getting educated somewhere. They're doing what they believe in their heart is best for their kids, right? Parents, what they absolutely think is best. And so we just have to help provide more information, and that's on us to do. It's not a parent's fault, but it, and afterwards, there's a lot of times people go, oh, man, I wish I would have known. And so, that's us. We got to do that. So we need to work at helping schools do that for their kids. So we'll get there.
That's whenever I'm asked advice from a younger person, especially in high school, they say, what did you do or what? It doesn't happen very often, but when it occasionally does, I always say, try to limit the number of times you have to say, I wish I woulda. I wish I woulda. Limit those as many as you possibly can. I'm one of those weird people that as a parent, I encouraged my girls to turn out for everything that they could. And if they didn't like it after 2 weeks, they could quit. And a lot of people I know don't like that. They want you to stick it out. And I go, what for? I don't want them to not try something for the fear of being stuck with it. And then if they are stuck with it, how good of a teammate are they going to be anyway? They don't want to be there. They're not having fun. It's no good. So that's just a different way. It's not for everyone, but for me, that's, and that might limit the I wish I would'ves. Because I can think of a couple of things I wish I would have tried, but I didn't, for fear of I might be stuck doing this for the next 2 months. And I didn't know if I really wanted to do it for the next 2 months. So again, I think that's a great, it's a great question to ask yourself, and try to limit that as much as possible. Mick, I'm excited. We're getting geared up. I'm excited for the fact that fans will be back. Just so folks may know, we will not be doing as many games as we did this past spring. It is highly unlikely we'll be doing any JV contests again. The schools that have the Pixel-Lots will be able to pick those up, and I know more and more schools are adding that. But we'll continue to come out. We're reorganizing where we're going to focus more on quality over quantity and larger crews so we can do more coverage. We can have a good broadcast. We can do some additional follow-up coverage, some fun stuff with social media, some social media interviews and things like that. As you can take a look around, for the most part, the coverage of high school sports, like coverage of many sports, is diminishing and continuing to diminish. We're going to try and fill that gap as much as we can with the games that we do. So that's where we're looking, and we're hoping these regulations stick so we don't have to rethink. I promise if we get back into a lockdown and fans aren't allowed again, we will go right back and make sure we'll cover as many games as we can with one person and do what we did last spring. We just sure hope we don't have to do that again, and would like to get back to quote unquote more normal athletics year. And I know you can't wait for that to start either.
Yeah. Paul, we really, really appreciate you and your team, what you do for high school sports, getting kids out there so they can be watched. Kids love performing for others, and for people who can't be there, being able to jump on and stream it, whether it's a parent traveling or an out-of-town relative, is an awesome service. So, and I know you work your fanny off doing it in a regular year, let alone last year. So thank you for making that happen.
Well, our guys stepped up. Some were just unbelievable, and allowed us to meet some new folks as well. And we're excited because one of the things we did do is we didn't do games where they did have picks a lot, and not that some of our regular schools that we stopped by, and we didn't do that as a punishment, but we wanted to go to schools that didn't have cameras to cover as much as possible during that crazy year. So again, we sure hope that we're over that. And winter, or I should say fall championships are all scheduled to be normal at the regular locations. And again, skipping last year, going back to 2019, that's the schedule that you guys are on, right? So you just, and there's going to be more talk about, we know, especially when this all blew up, was right around the talks were getting heated around the basketball tournament. But as long as things stay along these lines, basketball will be as it was in 2019 in the arena, the Sun Dome and the Tacoma Dome, and talk of a revamp will, I assume, continue at another, at some point, but it's not nearly as being rushed at this point.
No, what it was like, what would have been like 2019, 2020. And then this fall we're reviewing all tournaments and locations and going to get some to the board this winter to make some decisions moving forward.
So back to the regular schedule for this coming year, and hopefully everyone else is on the regular schedule as well. Mick, thank you for your time. Always great to catch up with you and your staff at the WIA that continues to do just a tremendous job in keeping us updated. And this will be a good one. I know we put out literally the text of those regulations from the health department. So folks that may have some questions about it, I think that you were able to answer. I know the questions I had off the top of my head and clear it up. And again, encourage them, if they have more questions, that they can reach out to their own athletic director. And I assume, Mick, if need be, that they can reach out. Athletic directors will reach up to you if they need to find the answer as well to you and your staff on what this fall is going to look like.
Yeah. ADs call us, so go to your local AD, you'll get an answer faster. And we have that link to our website as well, wiaa.com. So it's readily available to anybody who needs it. So,
all right, sir. Thank you much. Mick Hoffman, Executive Director of the WIA, right here on the Eli and on the Eli Sports Network.